name is Michael Hicks. I'm your host with the most. Welcome to another great episode of Framing New Heights, where tonight we're going to go deep into what I like to take is not just a climb, however, it's a thrive. Thrive at the top of your game. I'm your host, Michael Hicks, with the most, founder of Live to Thrive Life Coaching, where we believe success starts from within and it's powered by clarity, intention, and authentic impact. Today, we're exploring what it really means to lead with your voice and how that voice becomes your authority. My guest is someone who has spent nearly 2 decades in learning and teaching space, helping entrepreneurs, coaches, and experts translate their stories into real world influence. And I'm super excited about this because I do some guest speaking myself. But before I bring him on, I want to give you some words from our sponsor. Can't sleep, got the aches and pains. You got to check out this CBD oil. It is Amish tested, proven formula. All you got to do is I swear by this product. It's got it's simply, you can go to envitamins.com, envitamins.com. All cap locks, new heights. You get 50% off. What it does, it enhances sleep and it really relieves those aches and pains. And as well, if you're looking to heighten your career, maybe your life, your relationships, or just want to be a better person, I've got one spot left to June, and the deadline is coming up for my Live to Thrive coaching program. Go ahead and check it out. You can apply in my bio here, or you can go to www.livetothrive.com. Well, as I was speaking, my guest is no other than the one and only Andrew Chesnutt. Andrew is the founder of Authority Forge, and he is the host of Hustle and Grind podcast. And I'm hoping I get to be a guest on yours as well.
Absolutely.
And he's not here for hype, y'all. He's here for just results. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Andrew Chesnutt. Andrew, how you doing today?
I am doing awesome, Michael. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pumped that you're here. And let's jump in right away. Let's start at the foundation because my podcast is all about providing value to people. I've have all walks of life, and I'm excited about your journey and how you can share with our podcast listeners. Let's start with the foundation. Tell us the story behind the Authority Forge and what problem were you seeing in the industry that actually pushed you to create it?
So my story starts about 10 years ago. I'd been in the learning and development industry 10 years at that point, so total 20 right now. And I worked mostly in either finance, I worked in real estate, and I worked in the pharmaceutical industry. Biggest thing for me, the moment when that finally changed everything that said, I have a mission now in life, is I had to give an FDA compliance training. Now, anyone who's ever had to do this is now groaning and gotten a little bit triggered because it's probably the worst kind of training you could ever have to give. We have to give it every year, same content. Oh, it's terrible training. What I was challenged to do is to give a training program that was supposed to remediate people, supposed to help people that are making mistakes so that they could be in compliance with the law and just kind of get them back on the ship back on track again. Right. So I get this specification document. That's how we start a course. We have, here's our goals. Here's what we want to do. I get this thing. It's like 30 pages. And I think my boss's boss, my boss's boss's boss, and like 3 compliance lawyers wrote this thing. It's terrible. The only way that I could adequately explain this thing was academic assault. It was terrible. But it was meant to basically cover everyone and make sure we had everything together and could at least show the FDA, hey, we're at least trying to do this. So I created this thing. Took me weeks to put it together. 164 slide deck.
Wow.
It was awful. Took an hour and a half, minimum hour and a half to deliver. So this was the worst thing I've ever had to put together in my life. And so, of course, the day that I am ready to release it, the day it's all set, I give it to my boss and she's like, great. An FDA auditor is on site right now. They're doing an audit and we want to take a look. And he wants to see this thing. So I walk to the conference room and I want you to imagine this huge table, long table at the conference room, people sitting around it with just initials in their titles, and that's it. And the auditor at the end of the table. And so I give this thing to him and kind of let him scan it through. And after a couple of just bone chilling moments of waiting for him to look at this through, he looks up at me. And I realized at that point that FDA auditors have no discernible sense of humor. And so when he finally asked me, is this meant to help them or is this meant to punish? After a brief cardiac event at that moment, I realized I never, ever, ever wanted to be in the situation again. Like, I never wanted to create a training that was so bad that an FDA auditor would ask me, was this meant to punish them or is this meant to train them? And it wasn't that I was a bad trainer. It was just that it was not written in a way that was made for the human body. It was what we called check a box training. It was to just be able to say, I checked this box, I did it, we went from there. Fast forward a number of years, and I went into my entrepreneurial journey. I had been to a bunch of real estate meetings and always felt like I was being pitch slapped at them. Like, hey, come buy my thing, come do this, come join our course. Except one, with somebody who turned out to be a really great mentor and a good friend, helped him build two companies, named Chris. And he was the only one who I didn't get that feeling with. Like, I actually felt like I got value. So went to him. He had a TV show on HGTV called Risky Builders. It had already piloted 4 times. He was going to build an education arm to his companies to be able to go out and teach people how to flip. He had done 200 flips at this point, knew what he was doing, already had the experience. And so I explained to him, hey, I'm an instructional designer.
Yeah.
And he heard structural designer, because nobody knows what an instructional designer is unless you're outside the industry. Right.
Right.
So nobody knew what the hell I did. We came up with educational engineer after that, much more descriptive. But so he heard structural designer. He had 2 flips going with bad foundations. He needed an engineer. And that misunderstanding got me breakfast with him the next morning, where I could explain actually what I did. And the rest is history. I was with him for 8 years, building 2 companies through it. But what I realized is the TV show wasn't picked up. So it was already ready to go. Discovery purchased HGTV from Scripps Networks, and Discovery said no new shows. So there wasn't anything that we had done wrong. It just kicked to the chest, and now we have to move in a new direction. And we pivoted to life insurance, specifically a specific kind of life insurance. And the first thing I had to do is we had to come up with a way to explain this to people so they would understand how to use a life insurance policy as a banking system versus using it when they're dead, which isn't going to be a whole lot of use, while I'm still alive. So I had to help him come up with a presentation showing people not only this really complicated process and this really very difficult concept to get across, and to help to get people wrap their brain around it. It takes a while to get used to this concept. And I realized I was really, really good at taking those high level concepts and breaking them down. And I realized I really love doing it in the entrepreneurial world.
Mm.
And I found my calling. I found something that I was good at, that I love to do, and that was kind of my goal in life, is to be able to help entrepreneurs to find that voice, to be able to get that voice out to other people in a way that other people can understand. And oh, by the way, it also really converts well when you do stuff like this, especially if you're using a story-based concept. And that was the thing that I took away from the FDA training, is there was no story in that. This was just flooding them with information and hoping to hell that they got it. What I learned is, and I learned this through TED Talks as well, is that you can take this story, use a story arc for a sales presentation, and it just flows beautifully. This way, your customer doesn't feel like they're being pitch slapped. You don't feel like you're being the sleazy used car salesman, but it still gets the same result. And so over the past 8 years, I've been refining a process to be able to take these presentations and use and build them in a way that helps people to be able to have this really story-based thing. It helps you to build a tribe, is the other thing as well. It really helps you to be able to get people to know, like, and trust you much faster, much easier. And again, without feeling like a sleazy used car salesman. So, I am a storyteller, so that's kind of the longer
Yeah, no, I
version of
love
it,
it,
but
and
that's what I do.
that's awesome. No, I love it because it reminds me, similar to my coaching framework at Live to Thrive, is almost like if you don't define your voice,
Yeah.
the world will define it for you, right?
Yep.
Kind of
Absolutely.
even like when you walked into that meeting where the FDA auditor was like, "Hey, here's what it is." It's interesting because you know in your experience, it's the turning point that really helped you become the entrepreneur from, how can I say it, noise to notable, maybe, if that
Yeah,
makes any sense.
it did.
Yeah. So that's beautiful. I love that you shared that. And how, because a lot of us, being a life coach in the field that I am, a lot of us stumble in finding direction and purpose, and we're doing this 9 to 5 job that some people absolutely hate, and they're
Yeah.
just struggling and hating life when they're going to work on Monday. In fact, statistics show that most heart attacks happen on Monday because people hate what they're doing and what they're going to. What like give me like the nuts and bolts of the journey of like where was the you had that moment where they're like, oh, I don't you felt the uncomfortableness, you felt like
Mhm.
your voice was taken from you. Where was that moment of like, okay, I am pivoting and putting all my faith in me and I'm going and here's what I'm doing? When did that like really happen?
So it was about a year after that, or shortly after that FDA experience.
Okay.
I had always known I was going to be an entrepreneur. It just in the back of my head, something was seated there that said this is going to happen. I tried to start a video company when I was 16, a video production company. So this was back in the mid '90s before everything was cool and easy to do. So,
For sure.
back in the early mid '90s. So we're still working on really old tech at that point, and digital wasn't really a thing. So I had always known I was built for something larger. I had always known I was going to do something that was not a 9 to 5. I'm going to be blunt. I suck as an employee. I'm a really bad employee
Yeah,
because
that's
I want to
fair.
go
Yeah.
do really cool things. I
Yeah,
want to
for
go build
sure.
this awesome thing. I don't like that structure of that. 9 to 5 is great. Hey, if it works for you, that's fine. But if you're part of those people that don't and it doesn't work well with, find the way. And for me, and I found this with a lot of other entrepreneurs. I have a podcast as well, and I interview entrepreneurs, and sometimes, more often than not, actually, it's more let me go out and just I find this problem, let's go fix it. We're awesome problem solvers, and you just stumble across something like I do with FDA compliance training. I never thought that would lead to a career. I was just hoping to get out of that thing without a cardiac event. I mean, that was my thing. Is I was just hoping to get the hell out of that room as fast as possible. But for me, it just fell on it. And sometimes the best ideas are the ones where you sit back and go, I don't like the way this is. I reject your reality. I'm substituting my own. We're going to do this differently. We call them disruptors. We call them entrepreneurs. There's a bunch of words we use for it. But I think there's that one point when you finally say, I see something wrong and I don't want this to happen again. And for me, it was with keynotes. I don't want to have to sit through. We've all been there. You've been to events where you sit. There's this high pressure sales pitch going, go to the back of the room and sign up right now. Go see one of my people. This is an exploding offer. I don't
It's
want
the it's
that. That doesn't
you're
engage.
right, and it's even my girlfriend and I we went to it's interesting that you said that. It's not just in those events. We went to see Chris Tomlin. I don't know if you're a Christian follower by any means, but Chris Tomlin is a monumental Christian singer. So it's during Christmas, and he's singing all these beautiful hymns and songs, and we're all singing together. And then the pastor comes out and that gives you the sob story of like, okay, you got to help these people. So you almost felt the pressure then too to like, oh, I got to donate this amount of money. They're coming to raise your hand if you want the form to fill out. And it's like you're looking around, everybody's got their hands raised, and you don't have your hand raised. So I feel that pain from a different context, and I've been there, and I know exactly what you mean. I want to pivot here a little bit because similar to my Live to Thrive um, workshop, 70% roughly of people admit to struggling with imposter syndrome,
Oh
and
yeah.
at some point in their careers, right? And so I'm curious on how does the Authority Forge help people who to own their story and step into that with confidence?
So because I'm the story guy, I'm going to have a story for this one.
Good,
So
for
that friend of
sure.
mine, the friend of mine, Chris, he had been a financial advisor for, I think it was 15 years by the time we had started what was a company called the Money School, where we're working with the infinite banking policies or what they are. And he was frustrated one day. He's like, why aren't people getting this? It's so easy to me, it just total frustration. And I told him, look, bud, you're an expert. You've been doing stuff like this for a long time because he had been doing infinite banking for a long time for himself personally. He hadn't been teaching it, but he knew the concepts really well. And I'm like, look, you can jump from point A to point F in a single bound because you're really good. Other people have to have B, C, D, and E filled in,
Mm,
to make it happen. And so that's one thing that we're really good at is being able to take B, C, D, and E, step back a little bit, give that objective observer. Even experienced speakers sometimes have difficulty with this as well. Just being able to step back and going, okay, you need to fill this part in, or this is going to hit really well, but this isn't. It's like once you do something for yourself, I have people who review my keynotes and they've earned my trust and they're people that know the structure that I use, but I have people who review mine because I sometimes just need to step back from being in the forest and look at the trees and kind of say, okay, I need this, I need this help. And with the imposter syndrome, I think one of the things we find with imposter syndrome is we're all high performers. We are going to get imposter syndrome. It's part of what we do because we will not settle for less. we're going to constantly sharpen the sword, just constantly sharpen the sword. And imposter syndrome is a effect of that. I think comes out as far as the imposter syndrome and the building keynotes and building presentation or building a podcast as well. I think it helps us to put perspective. I know for me, when I get imposter syndrome and then I do a podcast and I get done going, damn, I know what I'm talking about. I've been doing this a while, almost a decade as well, and I'm good at what I do, but there's times still that I just need to hear it over again. And being in context, standing on a stage or being on a podcast and hearing ourselves say it over again gets us out of our heads and allows us to be able to say, no, I actually really do know. It gives us that other perspective, the outside perspective of
Yeah.
saying, no, I really do know what I'm talking about.
I feel you. This just happened last night actually, is when you're working with client for me at Live to Thrive is when I'm working with clients and they have been working with me. I've had one client and she's been working with me for an extensive amount of time, almost up to a year now in August. And she has grown tremendously. And I'm getting on these calls now. And in the process, probably about 7 months into her planning program, is she originally came to me because her and her husband had been separated. Well, long story short, her husband and her, I gave her the tools to get her husband back. She's with her husband now. Both of them are on calls with me together. And last night was, I had an epiphany, and I was like, her name is Kathy. Shout out to Kathy, my client. I said, Kathy, you're good. I said, you have made all this progress, all this change. And to going back to what you originally stated, you feel when it's kind of like the teacher, right? The teacher gives you the information and then they take it and they use it. And it's kind of like you now have been the Jedi and you gave it to the Padawan. The Padawan's becoming the Jedi, right? So that was my aha moments when I get that feeling. But I hear you. I know it's like, hey, you need that, like, and as men need that external validation of like, hey, you know what? That was an awesome keynote speech, and
Yeah.
we loved what you did with X, Y, and Z. Um,
Yeah.
so, hey, I want to ask you this really quick, and for some reason, I'm gonna have to. My brand new charging port is running low and it's not
Oh, no.
charging. So at some point I might have to have you talk and right have to grab the charger and do that. So this
Okay.
never happened, but there's a first time for everything. So I
Exactly.
want to I want to ask you this. Um, so let's kind of break it down for a second. What does the authority platform blueprint for your company actually look like? And walk us through some of those pillars if you could.
Yeah. So the very first thing we always start off with is some sort of a hook and then some sort of tell me about who you are. And what I want to do is I want to do it in context. So basically, why are you here and why should I listen to you? And it's a story-based arc. And then what I use after we're done with that, I'll use something I call my mountain Sherpa peak sequences. And so the mountain is the thing I've had to overcome. The Sherpa is the person or thing that has helped me to overcome it, and the peak is the view from the top. There's a few reasons I do this. It's first of all, it's a story arc. So I go from hey, I have to do this. Here's the thing, and here's what it looks like. So it helps create that story arc. Second thing, and this is what happens when your mom's a shrink, is stuff like this, is it our minds learn by taking an old way of doing something, tweaking it, and moving it into something new. And it's the fastest way to get that learning process to happen. And Nancy Duarte, I'm a huge fan of Nancy Duarte. She's one of the big names in speaking and presentation design. She has something she calls Sparkwire. But if you look, and she goes through in her TED talk about how Martin Luther King has used this, Steve Jobs used this during the iPhone rollout. It's here's the old way, here's the new way. By using this mountain Sherpa peak sequence, you're showing old way, mountain, how you overcame it, peak, new way. And it creates these new memories very easily and makes it easy to digest for the audience. So then we go into some teaching points. I always like to have something that people get out of a presentation. Kind of goes back towards my objective of I don't want it to just be pitch slapped. I want people to actually get something out of it that is tangible, that is usable, that they can all go and as soon as you're done, whether or not they buy your product, they can still go implement it because as soon as they implement it, Now they think about you every time they've implemented it. Now you're a value add to them. Now they have a higher chance of buying from you, and then a call to action at the end of it. So that's kind of high end what the structure that I use is. And so again, story arcs makes it really, there's some more involved with it, but that at least is kind of the high end of it, and what I do.
So, it's interesting because as keynote speaker, people are paying to see the speakers. So
Yeah.
I know as attention grabbers, right? And I know
Mhm.
I'm a content creator as well. And a lot of my business, I got to get people's attention within that first 6 to 7 second mark.
Yep.
So I'm curious, is that like, do you need something to grab their attention like right away? Kind of like what I mean, the term I think we use is the hook, right? The
Mhm.
hook to kind of get you, oh, okay, I'm interested. What does this guy have to say? Is that what you kind of teach too with some of your pillar work too?
We do, because that's the first thing to start. So think we are in a world right now where we sort of have gnat syndrome. We have the attention span of a gnat, and if you don't like, you
Yeah,
have about 5 or 6 seconds to hook somebody, and that's it. If you start in today, I am talking about real estate. Webster's dictionary says real estate. You lost them. You're done.
for sure, for
You lost
sure,
them at Webster's. No more,
for
right?
sure, for
But
sure.
if I ask you a question of, you ever thought about flipping houses but didn't want to have to deal with the house?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now
Caught my
someone wants
attention.
to know more.
Yeah.
That's actually a thing. It's land flipping. I just did that with a client of mine. She's a land flipper, and it's flipping houses without the house. And if I hook somebody in, now you want to learn more about it, and then I can, and going into your personal story as well, being authentic and being a little bit vulnerable. I actually just quoted somebody today who his father has been in prison for a very long time for murder. So we were talking about this in his keynote about how being vulnerable and how vulnerable should you get, and for him it was like, yeah, you need to do this, and you need to tell this story because it's a compelling story, but being vulnerable is the other thing as well in it too, is connecting with the audience. I've seen so many people just go up and robotically do their presentations,
Mm,
and while they might look like they're doing a good job, they might kind of have all the right words in all the right places. They're not making that authentic connection because they think, I don't want people to know about me. I had this problem too when we started that presentation many years ago with Chris. He did not want to say that his dad was an alcoholic. That was too personal for him. And I really strongly encouraged him to say, no, do this. A lot of people have the same common
for
background. So
sure.
this is really way out there. You're not telling anything super secret. You're doing it in a way that was not mean spirited. You were stating a fact, and people need to have this. And it actually worked out really well for him. He does still use that line in the intro, in his hook, or in his bio. So just that authenticity is another thing as well. People will see you as not authentic, and that's going to that can be problematic as well. But
Yeah,
yeah,
because
okay, the
what I
question.
think of, no, I hear you. What I think of immediately when you share what you said, everybody wants the story because then people can relate, right?
Yeah.
It's the relatable story. Oh, okay, yeah, I get it. Oh, yeah, I understand. It's interesting because one of my goals, because I'm in the process of writing a book right now,
Okay.
and one of my goals is to do a TED Talk.
Mhm.
And we may need to have a conversation after this podcast because I'm
Yeah.
serious because I've
Yeah.
I've I've connected with a few people, but sometimes I feel like they're overselling whatever they give. Then they come, you know what I mean. So I'm just kind of curious, but I wanna pivot here a little bit and thank you for sharing that because I think Andrew, that's really powerful. And I want to kind of share a stat for our audience today. Is according to HubSpot study, 92% of podcast listeners say they truly trust their host of the show that they tune into regularly. And that's really a deep influence, right? So similar to giving you that keynote speech, etc. So Andrew, for the coaches and entrepreneurs listening today, what are 3 moves they can make this week to start maybe building that authority? Now, before you answer that, I'm going to just step and grab my charger, but I'm going to have you continue to talk so I don't have to edit this completely. All right? Andrew, you
Totally
got the
get it.
question? You good, brother?
3 steps that entrepreneurs can use to build their authority.
Authority, yes, go.
Cool. So the very first thing, get very, very clear on your message. This is something I see in a lot of in people, and So when I go to masterminds, I have a different way of doing things. Most people go to masterminds to get information out of it. I am critiquing every presentation to then take that as information so that I can move forward and say, okay, how can I make my process better? Goes back to something we said earlier about imposter syndrome, and that really just being something that's supposed to push us forward, and we're supposed to really hone our craft. So the first thing and what I see with people is often they know what they're talking about. Let me do this. I'm going to start with a joke because I like this joke, and it's, I think, the best way to explain it. There's two people talking to each other, and the first person says, "Have you ever met anyone you knew was brilliant but couldn't explain them what they were doing to save their lives?" And the second person says back to them, "Have you met an engineer?" Coming from a long line of engineers, for me, and I say that with a lot of love for engineers, I have an engineering degree, so I feel like I can say stuff like this. What it is people and as entrepreneurs, we're really good at this too. We're brilliant at what we do, but we're not really great at being able to explain it to mere mortals. We're all very ADHD. That's something across the board that almost every single entrepreneur I know has. We're ADHD. We have race car brains, and we can think ahead of just about anyone in this world. The problem is getting that information out there. It can be problematic.
Or relating it to someone that, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But getting crystal clear on what your message is. So that's the first thing I can give. Make sure that people will understand it. Pass it by people. I've got people in my life who I will pass a message by and go, "Can you do the BS check on this for me? Do you understand what I'm saying, or is this not anything
That's
you can deal
legit. Yeah.
with?" Second one, be authentic.
Mhm.
Absolute authenticity. And be a little vulnerable in that authenticity as well. If you're up there just reading off a script, nobody is going to take you seriously no matter how good at what you do you are. And so be authentic. Make sure you're connecting with your audience in as far as that authenticity is concerned. You're not there as a robot, you're a human. What you're doing is probably not new. All of us kind of do a different iteration. I'm very much not the only person that's doing keynotes and podcasts out there. That's not, I have my own unique version of it.
For
You
sure.
want to do it my way, and you want to connect with me. And because like you said, with podcast hosts, you follow a podcast host because you connect with them. You follow a company or somebody to create your story because you connect with them. So that's but it's through that authenticity that happens. And here's what happens when you're on stage and you're telling a personal story. Your brain waves actually sync with the audiences. You create a mastermind doing this.
Yeah.
And it creates this moment where people are going to remember you. They're going to know what you do. You're going to be top of mind, and they're going to feel connected to you. People buy from people they know, like, and trust. So that's why I'm such a stickler on this authenticity and making sure that you are telling parts. You don't have to tell everything. You don't have to trauma dump. You don't have to overshare, but just being authentic and being open with your audience about maybe struggles. Okay. And the third one, so I call this visual junk food. If you go onto stage with a whole PowerPoint slide full of bullet points, no one's listening to a word you say.
Great.
I had this. I've had this. I don't want to say it was an argument. It was more of a spirited discussion with some clients who wanted to. They thought that they were giving a lot of value, and that so they went into this with the purest of intentions, saying, "I want to go give. I want to show everyone exactly what I'm doing so that they can do what I'm doing because I want to give all of this information." And then they put up a freaking spreadsheet. And I'm like, there is not a snowball's chance in hell anyone is understanding this. And I had to explain to them, this is the process you go through. I call it visual junk food. It feels really good. We feel full after we're done, but there's no nutritional value. It doesn't actually add to our story. It doesn't help us out. It doesn't really do anything for us beyond that. So I think those are the three. So I guess the first one is being clear, crystal clear about what you have, being authentic and a little bit vulnerable on stage, and then making sure that, no visual junk food. Don't do that. That's awful.
What's interesting is I was in the education system for many, many years before I morphed into my private in my industry of life coaching now and podcasting. And I can remember, and this is similar to keynote, but we would have professional development. We called it PD.
Mhm.
And some of these presentation specialists should take a course that you just talked about because it's just like, why? Like I know right away if I even when I was in my master's program, I knew right away if I was going to buy into that professor or that teacher at any moment at any time. So you got to get them right away. And I love what you said. I want to talk a little bit about your podcast because you
Mhm.
host the Hustle and the Grind,
Mhm.
where you really dig into the why behind the hustle, Andrew. And I love that because my agency, Live to Thrive, we believe that your why
Mhm.
fuels what prevents burnout, if that makes sense. And then what have you learned about purpose through the lens of other entrepreneurs? I'm just curious.
So, especially as men, we need a purpose. Good story. Friend of mine growing up, his parents retired. They were nurses for the VA for like 30 some odd years, and I can remember him telling me the story about how his dad went through the entire household, whole house, big house too, and cleaned all the little like the aerators in every single faucet, in
Wow.
every single because he needed a purpose. He ended up going up and taking a side job at McDonald's just to do something because for him, he needed that purpose in life. And once he retired, he wasn't able to do that purpose. We need to have a focus. We need to have a purpose. We need to have something to work towards, especially as entrepreneurs. That is something that takes us during those really bad days when things are going wrong and you're questioning your sanity and you're just almost ready to go out and get a job again because you don't want to deal with it. I call it the suck. When you're in those moments, it's that purpose, that guiding light that really helps us to be able to get over those moments and to be able to keep going. That's why, as entrepreneurs, we sound like we're crazy. We're not. We have a completely different world. We have a different work life balance. I am answering emails at 3 p.m. on a Sunday. I don't expect my staff to do that, but I'm doing it because that's how my balance works. I find other places to kind of take out some time for myself, but I have this purpose. My purpose is helping 100,000 entrepreneurs to be able to find their voice. And by naming it and saying every action that I do takes me takes me towards this goal, gives me that fuel that I need to be able to wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to crush this no matter how badly it's going.
Yeah. Gosh, there's so much you said there that I caught. And I struggle immensely, and I teach part of this, and I say this verbally and loudly and with enthusiasm and flailing on the ground because I think this is like so important. People retire to be tired.
Yeah.
Get rid of the damn word retired and
Mhm.
live a life, like you said, that's
Mhm.
purposeful. I have my agency. I can take my agency and I can live in a remote island, which I plan to do at some point, and still have
Nice.
clients and still live purposefully and love
Yep.
my life and live like that. But you're right though, Andrew. The majority of people that they work and they bank their hours and then they're like, yay, I retired. In fact, I know an individual, and I'm not going to give this person their name, however, was an educator
Mhm.
and retired at the age of 55. And they're retired and you know what they do? They tutor now.
Yeah.
But, but,
Yep.
but, but you just retired to be tired and do it again. Like, find if you like Andrew, like seriously, if you know your purpose intrinsically,
Yeah.
you'll know that retirement should never ever happen. Like, I
Mhm.
truly believe that we are meant to be on this planet and this earth to provide value to people. Like, our job is to provide value. Whatever your value is for you, it's helping individuals with keynote speakers and becoming, best versions of them on the stage and being vulnerable in that aspect. A lot of your pieces that you have really embed into my framework. So I love what you said there. I want to kind of piggyback here. So there's something called Fast Five. All right, I'm going to have some fun with you on this piece. And this is my first time doing it with a guest, so I'm gonna. Hopefully, this is I kind of get my ideas from these talk show hosts, and then but I kind of made it into my own little formula here.
I'm always
So
up for being a guinea pig.
good, good, good. Andrew, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that. Um, so one word, I call it the Fast Five. One word or one sentence answers only.
Okay.
Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Most underrated leadership skill.
Emotional intelligence.
Let's park and talk about that a little bit.
Yep.
I did an entire podcast on EQ,
Yep.
and that's part of my programming in Live to Thrive. And it's amazing how many people that we are around. I just want to know why. Why did you say that? Tell me why.
If you go into this entrepreneurship journey with any level of demons in your system, the entrepreneurship journey is going to bring them out and force you to face them. And if you don't, it will destroy you. And what happens is, and I've seen this happen with companies where you get a leader who has all of these demons and they're not facing them. And what ends up happening is the I want to use the word of the vibe of the company. A good friend of mine, Kelly, deals with that. His sales thing is vibe. That's his thing. So the whole vibe of the company, the whole way that it works, revolves around how the leader works. And if the leader doesn't work, not meaning doesn't work, but it micromanages or is just emotionally explosive or anything like that, it's going to trickle down through the company, and you're going to see that problem in the company. Show me the leader, and I can tell you the way the company operates. And so I think it's really important that as leaders, we develop that emotional intelligence to the highest level we can. And if we've got demons, we face them in whatever way that happens for you, like whatever way it works. But I think that's one of the biggest things is a really strong, emotionally intelligent leader can lead a company to these massive heights and just make these new things happen. If they don't have that intelligence, they end up getting a lot of bad habits to compensate for those demons, that end up then reflecting in their workforce.
Yeah, it's beautifully said. And I think when you equate what you just said, it comes down to knowing your employees and your
Yeah.
relationships with them, right?
Mhm.
I've used this analogy often because I've coached professional basketball for a few years. And
Mhm.
one of the things that I always use, that you can use this metaphor too when I'm working with individuals that are working and developing their career, is you have five-star athletes, right? Your
Mhm.
five-star athletes, they're going to get the job. 4 and 5, they're usually going to get the job done. You don't really need to micromanage them. You tell them what to do. They're going to probably go beyond or add about it, right? But then you
Mhm.
have your ones and twos, and maybe even your threes that you really kind of follow up with, and you got to remind them, and you got to tell them the expectation. Like, there's definitely a differentiation, and I love what you said, because there are leaders out there that don't understand that concept. They don't understand that
Yeah.
tier of you have your five-star and you have your one-star, and you just got to know how to manage those correctly.
Yeah.
Awesome answer. I love emotional EQ. I did a whole podcast on it, but I don't want to talk about it too much more. Number two, book every authority builder should read.
Oh, that's a really good one. I've never been asked this before, so it's going to take. Oh, Nancy Duarte, Resonate.
Say that again. So yeah.
Resonate by Nancy Duarte.
Okay. Okay.
That was the book that started it all for me. Yep.
Go a little bit more on that, because that intrigues me, because I've never heard that book.
So Nancy Duarte is not somebody that's known well outside of the learning industry. That's really where she's big. She did do a TEDx talk on how to speak and how to structure a good talk, but she's in the world of people that builds keynotes. She is one of the experts. She's like the top level expert, been doing it for 30 some odd years. And what Resonate does is it shows you the ability to be able to connect with your audience, how to do it, the structure behind it. Gives a brief framework on how to actually go through and make that work. So the way that I read books, I don't read books and then be able to pop out a sentence. I read books, integrate it, so everything kind of gets into the mishmash. So I can't pull out any specific stuff because it's been a long time since I've read the
For
book.
sure. For sure.
But that was really what it started off with. It gave me this mindset that yes, I can use stories, and here's how to use stories. Here's how to tell data that's in a way that's not dull, stuff like that. So it goes into it gives you a different perspective change. Like Dale Carnegie says, a paradigm shift. It shows you how to. No, sorry, that was Stephen Covey. It shows you how to structure data to be able to, and things that might be dull, and how to connect with an audience too. It's a great starter book, as far as being able to just learn how to be a better speaker in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Is I did my undergrad. I was like 6 or 8 credits away from organizational communication,
Mhm.
and then I switched it to education. So, and it's ironic now how it's kind of morphed, and I use a lot of what I learned from that. And I remember going in front of a class and speaking on these cue cards, and then I distinctively remember this, and I was so nervous. And now I embrace it. I love it.
Mhm.
I love being in a room where I can speak and share valuable information. All
Mhm.
right, here we go. I got the next one for you. Number three. favorite podcast episode you have hosted?
That's like picking your favorite child. um, the one that is really like these are hard questions. These are good. I'm not usually stumped.
That's
You get
okay.
more
No, that's
answers right
okay.
away.
I tell you, you're only going to get this kind of quality stuff, Andrew, on Framing New Heights, buddy.
Okay, so I'm gonna just manipulate the rules a little bit. I'm gonna
Go
substitute
ahead.
my reality.
No, go right ahead.
My favorite one recently was with a good friend of mine, Troy. Troy's been building companies for 30 years. And I want to go back to what we were talking about with imposter syndrome and how podcasts can help with this. So again, he's been building big companies for like 30 years. He's really good at it. You know, he also had that thing about a year ago. We talk about this on the podcast where he had already made his money. He doesn't need to go out and make money anymore. He can go and live on a beach in Mexico and be perfectly fine with it as far as like his day-to-day needs are concerned.
Yeah.
And he did that for a year and found out it's not for him. He's used to building things. He wasn't building anything. And he said he had huge issues with this. It caused it caused him to just, the mindset was lost and all of these things. He needed that purpose. Then he went and built another company because I think we're going to be building until we're in our 90s at least. That's how this
For
works.
sure.
And it's one of those things where as soon as he did that, now he's perked up. And I've seen it in him as a friend, just kind of, he's perked up a little bit. He's got a purpose again, and he really needed that. But it was nice to be able to talk to him. So I want to relate that back to imposter syndrome. So, I've been doing this a couple of years, but he's been doing a lot bigger and a lot, stronger than I have as far as building companies. And it was interesting to listen to him. First of all, we were able to talk as equals. And I never thought that was going to happen. For me, it was like I had not. He's got way more experience than I do, but we were able to talk as equals, and that right there helped with a lot of imposter syndrome for me. We all have it, And if somebody tells you they don't have imposter syndrome, they're lying to you. But that helped. Being able to do that said, "Oh wait, I have some authority now." Kind of brought that into my mind. And if we were talking about building companies and how there's always that first part where you're going to grind. It's how it works. I don't care if you've been building companies for a year or 30. There's that first part before things get traction. That really makes it fun. But that was my favorite one, not just because he's a friend of mine, but also because there's something more to it. That he's there. It was talking with him as an equal, which is not something that I ever thought that I would be able to do. That was different. So that was my favorite one so far.
Yeah,
I love them all, but that was my favorite.
No, I get it. I get it. Yeah, what I'm sure though too is, he respected what you are doing for your niche. I think that had a lot to do with that. I'm sure. All right, so number 4, coffee or tea while building empires.
Coffee.
Okay.
Yep, iced
Okay.
specifically. I don't want to wait for it to cool.
Where are you at right now? I'm curious. Where are you from?
I'm from Buffalo, New York.
Okay.
So, yep,
And
born
that's
and
where you
raised here.
at. That's where you reside now.
I am, at least for the
Oh,
foreseeable future. But next year I'm moving to Salt Lake City because you want to talk about an entrepreneurial city. Salt Lake City is very much entrepreneur filled.
really?
You'd
So
never
is
think it.
that
But yeah,
so that's I did not know that.
yeah.
So let me hold on. I got a couple of things in the chat here. Hey, any of our listeners, if you're catching this live right now, if you have any questions for Andrew, please pop them in the chat. We'll answer them before the podcast gets over. I got a lot of hellos for everybody. Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. All right. I love this because this next one is part of my branding and Live to Thrive. I use the word legacy.
Mm.
Legacy in one word. Go.
Outreach.
Mm,
And I want to explain that.
please.
So I told you I want to help 100,000 entrepreneurs to be able to spread their voice. But I want to go a little bit deeper into that and why I picked this number and why I'm going to help more than 100,000 people. That's just 100,000 entrepreneurs that I'm going to help. I want you to, every single time, entrepreneurs have this unique place in the world. What we do very, very well is we are the problem solvers. We're the ones who say, like I said earlier, I reject your reality, I substitute my own. I want to make the world a better place because I see a problem and I see a solution. So I think we have this very specific place in the world that we're here to change the world for the better. That's really what we do, and it's our duty to do that. To take that concept and that vision in your head and to make it reality. My place in that is helping somebody to be able to build the authority so that because they know what they're doing. Now let's prove it to everyone else that they know what they're doing. That's where the authority part comes in. And I just pick podcasts and keynotes because that's what I'm really good at. But every single person or every single podcast that I create for a client or every keynote that I create is going to be seen by multiple people. So let's take a keynote, for example. Let's say that somebody gives that keynote in a room of 100. Let's say that it resonates with like 30 of those 100. I've now helped 30 people. Those 30 people will go out and help 10. They will help 10, and it just keeps growing.
Yeah,
And so every time I can help somebody to amplify that voice, it has this like ripples in a lake.
for
And
sure.
so that's what I mean when I say legacy is the outreach, is the number of people I can reach and positively impact their lives, whether or not they know I was the one that did it.
That's so beautifully said, and I can completely. I love how you use the analogy of the ripple effect because, I mean, I reference this often is in the education system. Sometimes you feel like you maybe are lucky. When I was in that industry, is 1 out of 100 that you get to, but that's still one that you got to, right, to make a change and make a difference. Um, how do you stay relevant in your industry, and how do you stay current? Can you break that down a little bit?
Constant education. I mean,
Yeah,
today I went through and did a bunch of work on the framework that I used, just kind of tweaking and nudging. And there was a couple of things that like, yeah, let's dial this in a little bit more. That constant need to hit perfection. And it's not perfectionism.
okay,
I know I will never have the perfect framework.
for sure.
It's a goal that I can't reach, but I'm going
Right.
to try to get as close as I can to it. I nerd out to this stuff too. It's like this is my fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I get it. I
It
get
tells
it.
me I'm in
Yeah,
the right world, right?
yeah, yeah.
But for me, it's that constantly learning. Every time I see a presentation, I'm critiquing it in the back of my head, and it's not just to be a jerk about it, not to go putting anyone down. But what it does for me is it says, how would I have done this better? Is there a better way to make this work? Is there something else I can do to optimize this? Constantly optimizing. It's like the guys who go out and try to, they have a whole bunch of supplements and they do all of these, different biohacking and all of this stuff to optimize their body and how it works. I do also do that with my work. So for keynotes and podcasts, how can I make a podcast better? How can I make a podcast resonate with people? What's the best structure for them? What questions can I ask on a podcast, or should I ask a lot of questions on a podcast? So for me, I'm always asking questions like that. I'm always like picking away at little pieces, going, let's see if which piece today do I want to pick away at to see if it truly is going to stand to stand my scrutiny, or if it needs to be tweaked. So I'm always looking for those little places to just kind of dial things in as best I can.
Yeah, and that's so important because I think 90% of the individuals that live and we walk next to in our society walk with no twinkle in their eye,
Hmm.
no
Yeah.
form of excitement, no form of gratitude, no form of enjoyment of life, which is just so sad. And I love what I got from what you said is growth minded, right? You're
Yeah.
constantly evolving. Like we are always under construction. My goal or my motto in my programming is 1% better than I was the day before. How can I be better than I was the day before? Because
Yeah.
tomorrow's never guaranteed. We never have like, gosh, I can go on and on about that. It's just that working to become the best version, and I think that's really really well said. What book are you currently reading right now that's kind of helping you on this growth journey?
So I am currently reading a book by somebody I know, Deb Gabber, called "Branding is Sex." And if you know Deb, she's a New Yorker. She's very out there with stuff, but she is also a branding expert. She has worked with some major Fortune 100 companies on their brands. And her mentor was somebody who helped with the 1984 Mac rollout. So she's got some heavy hitting clout behind her as far as that. But it's on her whole mindset is irrational loyalty. I'm an Apple guy. I've used Apple for years, and I'm very, very much into the platform. I have the phone, I've got the TV, I've got the Apple Pod, the little thing that the Alexa, yeah,
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
got everything, right? And even if they fail me, and even if something goes wrong with my Mac, I will still be very, very attached to this brand, and I will just be very loyal to them. She shows how to build that, and that's her whole framework. So that's the first book she wrote. She wrote a second one called Irrational Loyalty, which is the next one on my list. But for me, it's not only good for my company. Again, I'm always learning about something, but it's also good for me to help my clients to be able to add maybe bits and pieces of what she's teaching into keynotes to be able and into podcasts to be able to help her to do that. So yeah, that's the book I'm reading right now.
I love it. It's interesting you mentioned Apple,
Mhm.
and I don't know if you know this, but Apple does not market to people that have purchased their Apple products because Apple knows that you're
Yep.
going to keep buying from them.
Yep. Yeah.
That's awesome. Um, so as we kind of wrap up today, Andrew, what if someone's stumbling on this podcast and they're thinking about entrepreneurialism or entrepreneurship, I should say, or once they learn better in communication, maybe they're a leader in some kind of business industry or just speaking. What would you say to them if you had a chance to get with them on an elevator and you had your elevator speech and you're ready to give them that pep talk? What would you say?
One of the worst things I see people say is I will eventually I'll get to it at some point.
Oh, I just posted something like this on my
Yeah.
storyline.
It,
Beautiful. Yeah, go.
I'm going to be really, really upfront with people. And I'm going to just tell you right now, you're going to suck badly.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
But you've done it.
for sure.
I think when as entrepreneurs, we have to realize, when we first do things, we're going to suck at it badly. That's how this works. And so it's one of those things where we've got to keep, figuring that out. We've got to keep just saying, I don't care if it sucks. I'm going to go try this. I'm going to do it. I got called out the other day by somebody who I trust. And I was thinking about a new product I was going to offer. And he was like, you don't need my opinion. You don't need my permission on this. Just go do it and see if the market will bear it. Just go do.
Yeah,
One of the things I can leave people with, if you have that mindset where you feel like you're going to suck and you feel like people are going to judge you, I want to remind you that the number one fear that people have is public speaking. And the reason they have that fear, it comes from our animal brain. Back in the days when we were being chased by saber-toothed tigers, I didn't want to be seen because I was now threatened because I was seen. And that's where that inner fear comes from when we stand up in front of people. And the second part of it is we have a fear of being judged. That's the second part of it. So the first one we just kind of have to get through. We all get butterflies when we first go onto stage. It is what it is. I've got experienced speakers, 40 years of experienced speakers who get a little bit of kind of a rush when they get onto stage. But I can address the second one pretty easily and say that you're doing something that 90% of the world doesn't want to do. And if somebody wants to judge you for being up there on stage, they can come up and do it too.
ah, you
You're doing
no
something that they
preaching.
wouldn't do. Yeah.
Yes,
And it
I love
really
it.
takes that and just completely reframes that mindset that you're doing something that most people won't want to do and that you're already climbing that mountain. They can come climb it with you if they want to. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's so easy for people to be what I even call couch GMs. Like
Hmm.
I'll go to the gym and I hear locker room talk and I hear all these. I was in the sports industry for basketball for many years, and but I hear now, and no one really knows truly. I was a general manager, and no one really truly knows what it's like unless you're in that role. But it's so funny how people can have criticism or have their opinion from sitting on a couch or being a spectator, and when
Yeah.
they don't really know the gist of everything. I like what you said. I like to say two words: embrace suck.
Yep.
Because in order to create any kind of change, you have
Yeah.
to go through to some type of adversity. And
Yeah.
without that adversity piece,
Mhm.
your life is going to be pretty boring. Like, honestly. And the more suck you can get better at,
Mhm.
the more you start resiliency. And then on top of resiliency, Andrew, you build anti fragility, which is
Mhm.
embracing resiliency over and over and over.
So that's
Beautifully
one
said. Go ahead.
thing as entrepreneurs. The thing I want to say is the good stuff's on the other side of that fear. And once you can overcome that fear, you can overcome anything because fear is a huge motivator to keep us back where we're at. overcoming it, there is this massive change that happens. I'm going to go back to something I said in the beginning, where if you come into this entrepreneurship journey with any level of demons, you're going to be forced to face them. But I'll tell you, by facing them, you are now a significantly stronger person.
Oh,
Entrepreneurs are some of the strongest, most resilient people I know. If things are going to happen and the government was going to fall and we're going to go into mass anarchy, I want to go get all my entrepreneur friends and hike them around because we're the ones that are going to survive it, because we're the ones that are going to deal with it because we've been through it. We know that no matter what's going to happen, we're going to figure it out and we're
you,
going to make it happen. And we're very risk tolerant, very, very risk tolerant. And that makes us really good. We have a specific skill set that makes us good at what we do. Yep.
I think of when you said all that, I think of, I am a person, I don't like surface level talk.
Yeah.
I
It's
want to get
boring.
in right away. Yeah, I want to get in right away when I know about you and learn about you. I want to know what makes Andrew tick. So I'm
Yeah.
going to ask you thought provoking questions. And it's interesting now that I've been in my relationship with Amber for a little over 2 years, and I'm around her family. And for some people, they won't let me in.
Mhm.
They won't let me in, and I want to, because I want to, like, I don't want to know about the weather. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't want to know about the NFL draft. I want to know about you, man. I want to know
Yeah.
about what makes you tick. What are you doing when no one else is watching? How are you growing? How are you changing your perspective on life? Are you
Yeah.
stretching the rubber band, so to speak? You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Do you
Yeah.
find
Oh,
having do you have any issues with that sometimes? Because I'll tell you this really quick here is I I I'll go to the gym after I work out. Sometimes I come later in the day and I'll just do a steam and sauna. And sometimes I just like to carry conversation. I being in
yeah.
the business, as entrepreneurs, the
Yeah.
more we talk, the more we get to know people, and then maybe they're going to be a client. You never ever know. You never know. So,
Yeah.
and I literally, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this on my podcast here. I was asking some pretty deep questions to this guy, and the guy goes, "Can you just stop?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll just
Okay.
stop. Oh, I got you. I got you." But do you ever get to that where, like, you, because I think I'm vibing with you, for the little word that we use
Yeah.
today. Like, do you feel like sometimes you get that where, like, people are just like, "Nope, I don't want you to go anymore. I don't want you to go any further." It's that. Do you feel that or no?
Thankfully, I usually back off before that point. However, I 100% have been at that position and I know what we're doing. We're very intense. It's
Yes.
our thing. We're very
Yes.
intense. And to some people, that's intimidating. And it's not that anything is wrong with us. We communicate on a completely different level. We communicate at a million. This is where ADHD comes in, and this is what this is. We communicate at a million miles an hour.
Yeah.
We're very intelligent. We're good problem solvers. We want to learn more and deeper about what's going on because we're trying to figure out more. And most people are really happy with this kind of the surface level, doing our thing. I mean, I could do small talk if I have to, but bluntly, I'd rather go in and go, dude, is your funnel working? How's that going on? What are you doing? Hey, everything
Yes.
work?
Right. 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 I
I want to go down
feel
the
you,
rabbit holes,
man.
man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for us as entrepreneurs, sometimes that intensity can be seen as toxic to people that don't understand it.
Mhm.
I think it's something we see in our world right now, especially with Doge and everything going on with the government. I think it's a different mindset. I'm not going to say it's the right way or the wrong way to do things. I don't want to make any political commentary on it, but I do want to give another option that you've got two entrepreneurs who are in charge of things, and they think very differently. And looking at it from that mindset that if you're expecting somebody to come in one way and they come in another and you don't understand what that is, it can make things look very bad when it may or may not be. Again, I don't want to go into any details on it, but I just want to say that it might be something different. And we're seeing that right now. But with entrepreneurs, we want to change the world and we're crazy enough to do it. It might not be the right way. Might not be we're going to make a ton of mistakes. We're good at mistakes. I'm really good at mistakes, man.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are fine being in a world where they don't have to worry, or they're kind of floating along. They're doing their thing.
It's
They're
that
very
little
comfortable.
bubble.
They
Yeah.
like it. They know it's going to happen. That's great. That's not my world. you know? um, More power to people. This isn't a judgment call on anyone. I'm not better or worse than anyone. I'm just different. But I think that's where it comes from. Is we are intense. We are very passionate about what we do. Sometimes all we have is that passion. When you've got $2 in your bank account, you've got an entire staff to pay, and you're not sure where your car payment's coming from.
For
Sometimes it's
sure.
all you got.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it
A
was
lot of people misunderstand what that is.
Yeah, you're right. I think you nailed it, and honestly I appreciate you even bringing that to surface and light because sometimes I just am like, gosh, my intent was this there, like and you said it really really well. All right, hey, absolute pleasure speaking to you, Andrew, and I'm really glad how we connected. And don't when I stop the live here, I want to talk to you a little bit after
Sure, man.
we're done here. Now's the moment where I want you to share all of your goodies to everybody. How can our listeners get in contact with you, and how can they dive deeper into what you're building?
Sure. So, best thing to do, go to my website, theauthorityforge.com. Also, feel free to reach out, Andrew at theauthorityforge.com. I do answer my emails. So then that way you can get directly in contact with me. Oftentimes, what I like to do is we'll hop on a call, we'll see where you're at. By the end of that call, you're going to have some insights, whether or not we work together. I like to at least leave you with some level of value. It's like I like to do with my keynotes, where I'll leave somebody with some value. I like to do that with my calls as well. So at least give you a direction. You might get some business advice. We're going to chat for 30 minutes and see where it goes. But if there's something I can help you with, I'll bring that up as well. So yeah, let's do that. Just give me an email. I'll give you my booking link. We'll get onto my calendar. We'll go from there.
Are you on LinkedIn or anything?
I am. So the one thing I don't like giving links
Okay.
because or I like giving links, I should say, and the reason why is my last name is spelled Chesnutt. My ancestors were very slightly sadistic and like to see who's detail oriented because it's not chestnut spelled normally.
Yeah,
Two
yeah,
T's at
yeah,
the end, none in the middle.
yeah.
So it's always an issue. Like people
Isn't
are like,
hey,
"Where are you?"
isn't there like a chestnut hot dog eater guy? Is that am
Yeah,
I
Joey Chestnut. Yeah,
okay,
I don't know if
okay.
there's a relation
No
at all,
relation, no
but yeah,
relation,
it's
y'all.
spelled
No
the same
relation.
way. Yeah, it's spelled the same way.
Is it
So he's
really?
probably related somehow. Yeah, he's probably
Oh,
related somehow. Yep. Yeah, we haven't figured out exactly how. Mark Chestnut, the country singer, same thing, spelled the same way, and so yeah, we're related somehow. I don't know exactly how, but yeah, yeah.
so going
But it
back to
is
what you said though, you said something about links. What were you going to say?
so as far as you're welcome to try to look me up on LinkedIn. I would actually like to put a link if we got like show notes or anything.
Yep.
Yeah, Andrew Chestnut, Chesnutt. The Authority Forge is also on LinkedIn as well, so you could take a look at me there.
Perfect. Well, you heard it all here, y'all, from Framing New Heights. And, whether you're on a stage, behind a mic, or coaching one on one, your message matters. And I hope today's episode truly fired everybody up because it did for me. And I appreciate you, Andrew, significantly because it's always good to have individuals that are kind of are on the same wavelength. And
Absolutely.
so please, if you are listening to this, subscribe, tell someone who needs more clarity, and check out livetothrive.com. That's www.live2thrive. That's LIV, the number two, then thrive.com for more information. Or you can always hit my socials, which is in my bio or in the show notes. And as always, 1% better in mind, body, and soul.
Mhm.
Stay flexed. Come on, Andrew. Get him up. Flex him up. Yes.
Bringing out the gun show.
That's right. That's right, buddy. Hey,
Thanks, man.
hold on. Yeah.